Welcome, Irish fans, to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. I am Vince D'Addario. I am the football analyst here at irishbreakdown.com, and we are happy to have ND Insider, South Bend Tribune beat writer for the men's basketball team, Tom Noie, with us for another edition of Irish Crossover. And I would say that there's a lot to talk about, Tom, with this particular basketball team over playing under the Golden Dome. This has been the last time we talked was beginning of February, and it was kind of a crossroads, I guess. There was the Dumb and Dumber. There's still a chance situation at that point, but I think we have officially gone past that mark.
We're done.
I don't think we're not talking NCAA tournament anymore. But give me just kind of a state of the program, where you think things are, and then we'll dive into some specifics.
My biggest concern or disappointment with this basketball team is the fact that for whatever reason, whether it's inside, whether it's something with the coaching staff, whether it's something bigger picture with the program, my biggest disappointment with this program is they just don't know how to handle success, Vince. Like, go back a couple Saturdays ago, and Notre Dame plays probably its best first half of the season, other than the first half that they had at Rupp Arena, and just smoking Syracuse. Notre Dame's up 55-35 in the Carrier Dome. They're about 18 minutes away from not only getting back to 500 in the league for the first time over in almost a year, but 500 overall. And really, they'd won 6 of 8. Really generating some momentum and some positive vibes around the program. Like, okay, this is what this program can be.
Yeah.
That 20 minutes in Syracuse, maybe they weren't going to be an NCAA tournament team this year, but we finally kind of saw all the pieces coming together with this junior class. And then what happens? You know, they're up 55-35. They blow the lead. They trail the final 8-12 of that game. They never lead at Louisville. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but they never lead at Boston College and give up 94 points. And a team that's this close from going 10-10 and 7-7 in the league, all of a sudden we're sitting here on March 3rd, and they're 9-13 and 6-10, and basically they're playing out the string.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point with the Syracuse game, because I watched that first half and it was like, okay, the light has turned on. They figured it out. They're playing good defense. You know, they're shooting the ball well. I mean, it might have been, like you said, the best half of offense or best half of basketball that this team has played all season. And then it was like they packed it up and sent, they picked 5 guys out of the stands, that, the mythical stands, of course, and, said, hey, go finish off this second half for us. I mean, it was 2 completely different teams that we saw in one game. It's hard to fathom at times.
The one issue that this team has always had this season, whether it's at Michigan State, whether it's second half at Kentucky and Rupp Arena, second half at the Carrier Dome against Syracuse, the entire game against Louisville, or the second half at McCamish Pavilion against Georgia Tech, when you run athletic, big, long, aggressive guys down, pushing them right down their throat at Notre Dame, they don't know how to counter. Like, hey, I think the light bulb, as much as we talked about the light bulb going on for Notre Dame, the light bulb goes on for a Georgia Tech, for a Syracuse, when they're in those huge holes. Like, Notre Dame's up 17 at Georgia Tech. They're up 20 at Syracuse. And the other team thinks, you know what? We're not going to beat this Notre Dame team in a jump shooting contest. We're just not. They're too good of shooters. But how about if we just start playing downhill and just run the ball right down their throats and see what they do? And usually they're backpedaling and they're done. And for whatever reason, it's happened in all those games. It happened against Louisville just last week at Yum Center. And then it happened really against Boston College, to where if you challenge these guys and you come right at them, they're probably not going to have a counter to try to figure it out and say, okay, you guys are going to do this, but we're going to turn it around. We're going to do this, and we're still going to be a good team.
I guess one of the things that surprised me the most about that second half against Syracuse was how poorly Notre Dame dealt with the full court pressure. I mean, usually, you coach a junior high team. You're like, okay, let's put some full court pressure on them. We'll get them, to turn the ball over, et cetera, et cetera. You don't really see that at the college level. No. And I can't really remember the last time I saw that with a Notre Dame team. They usually, in the past, handled pressure pretty well. Mm-hmm. They completely crumbled under the full court pressure. It was astonishing to me how ineffective they were against full court pressure.
Mike Brey has his faults, and he'll be the first one to say a lot of times after games, you know what, I didn't help these guys. I didn't help them as much as I might have been able to, or I should have. Maybe I could have done A, B, and C. But like you said, we're talking about handling a press. Like when you first started playing basketball, 5th grade, 6th grade,
right?
You kind of thought, hey, look, what are these guys doing coming down the floor and coming up against us and pressuring us? Like how do you learn how to handle a press when you're in elementary school?
Right.
And it should be something where, Mike Brey can say, hey, let's diagram this or let's diagram that. But Prentice Hubb and Trey Wirtz and Dan Goodwin have to know, okay, they're going to get up into us. And when they do, this is how we're going to break it. And for whatever reason, we saw it against Georgia Tech. We saw it again against Syracuse, where you talked earlier about the light switch finally going on. For whatever reason, when that light switch goes on, then suddenly it turns off and they just forget how to play. They're kind of nonchalant about it. Like some of the passes that they threw against that pressure.
Yes.
You're watching it on TV. You're going, what are you doing? Like it's not even grade school level passes to where they don't know how to solve it. They had the wrong guy about 3 or 4 times taking the ball out of bounds. And again, you can say that comes back to coaching and throw a lot of this on Mike Brey, and so many fans have. But at some point, your guys just have to go play and figure it out. And I think big picture, this is where Mike Brey has fallen into trouble with this program, because for so long in the past, whether it was Jaron Grant or Pat Connaughton or name your guy, he put those guys on the floor and he didn't really have to coach them. They figured it out. I think he sees Dan Goodwin can be like Pat Connaughton. Prentice Hubb can be like Jaron Grant. And we've seen time and again this year that for whatever reason, something short circuits and they can't figure it out and they just can't go play. And that's what leads Notre Dame to the record that they're sitting with here on March 3rd.
And this is speculation, obviously, on our part, but do you think – now these guys have been in the program, obviously, for 3 years. They've been playing for 3 years, I mean, this particular group. And I think there's some validity to what you say. Would you put any of that on the fact that they missed all summer and fall playing together at all? I mean, does that have anything to do with it, do you think? Or do they have the experience and it really shouldn't have been a problem going into this year?
It does, but there are so many factors that we can point to this year and say, okay, this is why it hasn't worked out. Obviously, missing all of spring and all of the summer program. Like all the summer, those main 7 guys would be playing together and be handling pressure and figure out how to go through game situations. All right, we're up 1 with the ball with 7 seconds. What do we do? Like that stuff that they do in the spring and the summer and the early fall, that hasn't happened. That didn't happen. And then you just go through the entire schedule and look at the schedule and say, it was going to be really hard given the non-conference schedule, given the fact that we're sitting here on March 3rd. And between February 3rd and March 3rd, Notre Dame's played 1 home game. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like, are you freaking kidding me? They played 1 home game to where, you want them to go beat Boston College. But Mike Brey said the other day, he said, before they even got on the charter, I knew we were in trouble. Like emotionally, those guys were just absolutely running on fumes. So it's a lack of summer. It's a lack of continuity in the schedule. And it's just everything. Like let's go back to when we were in college. We're in college and we're juniors in college, or we're sophomores, or whatever class we are. Would you be able to do what this group has been asked to do? And that's basically quarantine since August 10th.
Yeah.
We're sitting here on March 3rd. So from August 10th to March 3rd, it's don't be a college kid. No parties, no get-togethers, no gatherings, no football games on Saturday, no seeing your friends. You're going from Rolf's Hall to back to your off-campus apartment, and then your off-campus apartment back to Rolf's Hall, and that's it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's so many factors that go into why this season has dissolved into what it was. But at times, like Syracuse, like Georgia Tech, you just think this junior class they just have to be better than what they've shown.
Sure. Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I felt like the last 2 years that this class could have been really special. I mean, being able to play with each other. Now they've had to deal with some injuries and some other things. And I want to go back to that Boston College game a little bit. Notre Dame has not had an issue the last few games, scoring the basketball. Mm-hmm. They've been okay in that regard. Is it all? Do you put it all on the defensive side? I mean, they scored 90, but they gave up 94. I mean, you figure you scored 90 points, you got a pretty good shot at winning the ball game, but they gave up 94. And watching that game, it just felt like, the proverbial, you could have bought a ticket because there was a lot of standing around on the defensive side. What can you do to turn it? Because the defense, it's up here, I mean, it's an effort situation. It is, but Mike Brey says he knew that they were going on fumes going into that game. Does that have anything to do with their defensive struggles?
It might, but you know what? All this talk about defense, and I think maybe we were when I was on before, we talked about that whole stop score thing.
Right.
That was fool's gold for this program. It really was. Like everybody's talking about, oh, look, Notre Dame can play defense now. They're locking in. They're doing this. That was never going to last. Like that defensive stance or getting in stance and right. Being good defensively, that was only kind of carry this team for so long, because at the end of the day, this program is who it is, and it's really built on offense. And they had the mindset of Boston College hasn't played in 2 weeks. They haven't won. They've won one game the entire calendar year of 2021. We got this.
They don't have a head coach. I mean,
they don't have a head coach.
Yeah.
They have no idea. They've got. I think they had 7 guys available for that team. They had no idea what they were going to see. You know what? We're just going to show up, and even Mike Brey said, like Mike Brey was asked about the defense after the game on Saturday, and he cut off Patrick Engel from Blue and Gold because Patrick's asking about the defense, and Mike was just like, no. Like that was bad. That was previous habits. That was Ole. It was Matador defense, and he said they know it. Like they're not good enough yet to just say we're going to go hang 90 and that's the way we're going to beat you.
Sure.
Because they can't they still can't defend. They still have to understand they don't have to be Virginia, but you can't give up 94 points to a team that was averaging 72. Like there was no chance. They looked at it. They looked at that and said, you know what? Let's just trade baskets. And that got them beat by the worst team in the conference.
Yeah. And it just, you can almost stomach some of the other losses, but it just felt the Boston College loss just felt different, right? I mean, it was, again, the worst team in the conference, and put 94 on you. I mean, that's just a good number, man, and that's tough to swallow. And it just felt different from a fan standpoint, from somebody who doesn't follow the team as regularly as you do. Mm-hmm. It just felt different. Yeah,
I mean, all the other losses, it was hard to win when you had a 7-point lead at Blacksburg against Virginia Tech, but Virginia Tech's just better.
Sure.
It's hard to solve the Rubik's Cube that's Virginia, but Virginia's just better. Winning at North Carolina, they beat them up on the backboard because North Carolina's got better basketball players. The Boston College game there was no excuse. Like you couldn't say, yeah, they lost, but they just lost to the freaking worst team in the league. Come on.
Yeah. So let's talk about this season and where we're going moving forward. NCAA talk, obviously out the window. That's fine. The NIT is a shrunken field. I don't think that's going to happen, right?
No.
Yeah. And there's another tournament out there too, isn't there, that they could potentially be a part of, maybe. But is there any point at this point to doing any postseason work?
None. Not. I mean, let's say they win tonight against North Carolina State. They find a way to beat a ranked team for the first time in forever on Saturday with Florida State, and they make a run in the ACC tournament and get to the semifinals on Friday night in Greensboro. Then maybe you might want to explore postseason a little bit deeper. But right now it's like, get these last 2 regular season games in, go to Greensboro, see what you can do.
Sure.
And then let's just close it down, because it's it's just really not like, what are you really going to get out of a postseason tournament other than going to the NCAA, which you're not going to do?
Yeah, no, good point. And I mean, let me ask you about we've talked. I think we talked about this last time that Jogo and Jawan Durham, they've already been basically told, this is it. This is your last year. With the way that they played this year, is there any benefit to bringing those guys back? Is there any way, if you're Mike Brey, you're thinking, well, maybe we should reconsider since they got another year of eligibility, I'm bringing those two guys back?
No, and I think let's clarify something. I don't know if they've been, quote, told.
Okay.
I think it's come to it. I think it's an agreement because, look, Jawan Durham, say what you want about Jawan Durham, but he has played his best basketball this year.
Absolutely.
That said, he believes he's a professional basketball player. That may not mean, that's probably not going to mean the NBA, but this kid wants to go out and earn some money. Like eventually you want to be like, yeah, for me, college was a great time at the University of Dayton, but I didn't want to be there for 6 years.
Right.
Come on, let's get the ball rolling. Let's start the next chapter of my life. And
sure. I
think Nick Jogo is the same way. So they have one scholarship available for next season. So I don't know if it would be you don't bring either of those two guys back. Say, look, you did what you did. Thank you very much. Just like last year at this time when everything got shut down and all the Notre Dame fans were thinking, hey, John Mooney, hey, Rex Pfluger, hey, TJ Gibbs, maybe those guys are coming back. And Mike Brey was like, no. It's time for them to go. They know it's time for them to go. And I think Nick and Juwan both feel like, I've been in college for 5 years. It's just time to get on with life.
Have you been at all impressed with what Nick Jogo's been able to do this year now that they're kind of leaning on him a little bit more?
Yeah, it's funny. I get so many emails about shame on Mike Brey. It took Mike Brey 4.5 years to figure out that Nick Jogo can be a contributor. That's only part of the story. I think it took Nick Jogo 4.5 years to figure out how he fit, because in Mike Brey's system, if you can do one thing really, really well, you're going to play. Now, it took Nick Jogo 5 years to kind of figure out what that one thing was, and it turns out it was little of everything. Just be kind of like a stabilizer guy. Move the ball, get a rebound, keep the ball, make a shot every once in a while, defend. Sure. So it's good to see Nick Jogo persevere, because I mean, he had so many chances early in his career, and it just never happened for him. And Mike Brey kept saying over the summer, he said, Nick Jogo will be a key part of this basketball team. It's good to finally see that happen for him. And even though it's been in like short bursts for Nick.
So they're going to lose those two guys. That's a given. How does this team look any different next season than they do this season? What can they do to build on? I mean, I don't want to say that this is a lost season. There's obviously stuff you can build on. Mm-hmm. How does this team look different next year with maybe the guys that are coming in, maybe just these guys, take their game to another level? Maybe they're not dealing with injuries. How does this team look different in 21-22?
Sitting here on March 3rd, we have absolutely no idea. None. Because if the one-time waiver, the transfer waiver goes through and college basketball players are allowed to transfer and become immediately eligible, it becomes Thunderdome in college basketball. Even Mike Brey talked about last week, or a couple of weeks ago on one of his Zoom press conferences. I asked him about all the stuff that's going on recruiting-wise, transfer-wise, COVID-wise. Like, how do you plan for the 2022 class? And there's a thought that for college basketball coaches, it might be more important for them to recruit current players that may or may not transfer in than to recruit high school players.
Huh.
So what does 2021-22 look like? You're going to, at this point, you have Prentice Hub, you have Trey Wirtz, you have Dane Goodwin, Nate Lashevsky, Paul Atkinson, the transfer from Yale, maybe. Like, do any of the guys on the current team say, I'm going to explore that one-time transfer rule and go play at school A, B, or C immediately? That may happen.
Yeah.
It also may happen that there may be a transfer that wanted to go to Notre Dame originally, didn't for whatever reason, and now he's back in the transfer portal and wants to play immediately and wants to play at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Well, what does the roster look like? And how does J.R. Knesny and Blake Wesley fit in? At this point, until we get to August and say, all right, this is this team, that's when you can start to figure out these are how the pieces are going to fit on the board.
Have you been updated, or have you heard anything about Robby Carmichael, where he's at? I mean, talk about a kid who just can't catch a break in his college career. I mean, I could see him potentially transferring too if he gets that opportunity. But have you heard anything about what his status is?
He could have, if he really wanted to, and if Notre Dame really wanted to, I think he could have played this month. And that was only this month. And again, it's like, why even bother if you only play like 5 games? You don't know. I think he'll be ready to go full steam in the summertime, maybe late summertime, be ready to start going 5-on-5. But it's again a tricky situation with Robby Carmichael to figure out, okay, does he fit here? Because we don't know. Like, we've never seen him. Does Robby Carmichael want to transfer and go somewhere else? Would you? Like, I mean, I wouldn't, because I want to. Number one, he's got to stay healthy for an entire season.
Sure.
Which he hasn't been able to do. And until he does that, we don't know. And I don't think anybody knows if he can be a contributor at this level. Yeah,
no, that's a really good point. I think he could add something to this roster if he pans out to be what we've seen in glimpses.
Mm-hmm.
I think he could definitely help out this roster next year. I'm a little concerned about, and I think we talked about this last time, I'm a little concerned about the fans thinking that this incoming freshman class is going to like save the day.
Don't go there. Like we talked about last time, and you and I both know, the NIC is a really long way away from the ACC.
Yes.
Like Blake Wesley and J.R. Knesny, they eventually have the potential to be really good players, but both of them are going to have to just live with Tony Rolinski, the strength and conditioning coordinator for men's basketball, and put some sort of weight on, because the weight that they carry now and their body makeup, they will not survive an entire season in the ACC, because you're playing against men in that league. You're playing against pros, and in the NIC, you're being guarded by guys who are 5'9".
Yeah, no question. How do you see, Tony Sanders and Mattzona fitting in with this group? Because obviously they got some playing time early on in the season, but they've pretty much been on the bench from there on out. How do you see those guys fitting in?
It's Tony Sanders, Mattzona. I'll throw Elijah Taylor in there too. Elijah Taylor was out with an ankle injury all year this year. I think he also could have helped. I think they can help somewhere along the line. They're going to fit in, because Mike Brey's got to think, okay, I lose Juwan Durham, I lose Nick Jogo. You can't go with a 7-man rotation again this year. The offseason is going to be key for the development of all those returning guys. Sure. Because it's not going to be a 7-man rotation. It's got to be a little bit of Tony Sanders here, maybe a little bit of Robby Carmichael there, Mattzona as a big backup to Paul Atkinson, if Paul Atkinson eventually winds up coming, the Yale transfer, because Mike Brey was hopeful that Paul Atkinson was coming, and he had talked with Pat Holmes, the academic advisor, about all his graduate school classes, but then. Yeah, we're gonna allow graduate transfers back to Ivy Leagues. So Paul Atkinson may have a decision to make and say, boy, I got Notre Dame here, I got Yale here. What do I want to do? So what happens if Paul Atkinson decides, you know what, I want to run it back one more time with my guys in New Haven? So it's a big offseason development summer for Elijah Taylor, Mattzona, and Tony Sanders, because they can't be just bench guys and throw them in the starting lineup to shake things up the way Mike Brey did against Miami this year. They had at least one of those guys have to be guys.
So the elephant in the room, at least with a lot of other local media guys who I've listened to over the last few weeks, is the future of Mike Brey, things of that nature. I'm not necessarily asking you to speculate, but
we're 25 minutes in. Now we're getting to the good stuff.
I know. I was trying to ease the water here a little bit. You mentioned earlier that, sometimes it's not coaching. Sometimes it's just the guys on the floor. And I totally get that. We both coached before, in some form or fashion. Sometimes it's the guys on the floor. Sometimes it's not X's and O's, it's the Jimmies and Joes. But your thoughts on Mike Brey? And this season has just been strange. There's been a lot of there's nothing more I can do. There's nothing more I can say kind of stuff coming from him, which I get. But I think the short bench, the kind of no answers in the press conferences, is starting to wear on some fans. Your thoughts on Mike Brey and kind of where he's at in his future at Notre Dame, because he's under contract for a while.
He's under contract through 24-25, so that's 4 more years after this. If Mike Brey decides that he wants to return for 21-22, I think he and Jack Swarbrick have to have a meeting similar to the meeting that Jack Swarbrick had with Brian Kelly after Brian Kelly went 4-8 and said, look, what you're doing now with the staff that you're doing it with is not working. This is the 3rd straight year. Given everything, I understand the coronavirus at the end of last year, the having to play freshmen 2 years ago when they went 3-15, the weird year that it's been this year. But at the end of the day, you've still lost double-digit league games 3 straight years. So what you've tried to do with this program isn't working. What can you do differently, and who can you do it differently with that could maybe get this team back, not necessarily to an Elite 8, but get it back to some stability in the program to where it's just not all over the place. And that's where it is right now with Mike Brey. The more you watch this team, the more you kind of get an idea that Mike Brey here and there are things about this program to where it just seems like he's hanging on and playing out the string.
Yeah.
And I'm not ready to sit here and say a change needs to be made, but something other than the status quo needs to be done. And will it be done this season in terms of an assistant coach? Will it be done with, Mike Brey? Who knows? Mike Brey has every intention of finishing out his contract and being here 24-25. But what happens at the end of the year if Mike Brey pulls a Muffin McGraw and says, you know what? I'm done with this.
Yeah.
I just why jump through all the hoops and try to get this program back to where it was in 15-16 when I'm already the winningest coach in program history. Whatever I do, short of going to a Final Four, isn't going to be enough to acquiesce for the fan base.
Sure.
And he says, I'm going to Florida. That's it. I'm done. Which really, that could happen. Anything could happen this offseason. We have no idea what's going to happen. But if Mike Brey's coming back in 21-22, something's got to change other than just keeping the status quo, because as we've seen, the status quo just is not working.
Well, 4 years of not going to the NCAA tournament. There was a stretch there where you could count on Notre Dame being in the tournament and at least making it interesting, right? That was great, and I don't know that, of course, Irish fans always have, expectations that are super high, and I totally get that. But, consistently making it to the Final Four, to the tournament, making a little bit of a run, and then every few years, maybe you make that Elite 8 run like he was doing. I think that's realistic, but they're a long ways off from that. Missing the tournament 4 years in a row, and I realize there wasn't a tournament last year, but if there was, they weren't getting in. So 4 years in a row, that's a tough pill to swallow for a lot of Notre Dame fans.
It is, but they also have to look at that if they want to carry that flag of 4 years in a row, and they want to just pound that narrative of 4 years in a row. What you also have to do there, Vince, is say, give this program a quote normal basketball season, which they haven't had in the 4 years that they've missed the tournament. When you go back and say, okay, they missed the tournament in 17-18, but they lost a player of the year candidate and possible first-round NBA draft pick to a broken foot.
Sure.
And then they lost their second best player to a sprained ankle. And then they lost their star freshman to microfracture knee surgery, probably one of the worst surgeries and injuries and recoveries that you could have that year, and still fell one game short. And then the year after that was an absolute disaster, having to play freshmen in a league where they just got ground up. And then they get last year, and then they get this year. So give me a normal basketball season where you're playing the normal amount of non-conference games. You're playing a normal league schedule. You're not playing a grinder league schedule the way it is now. You're playing with all your available guys. Nobody goes down and gets hurt. Like the one guy you can't afford to lose, you lose.
Right.
Back in 13-14, it was Jaron Grant. In 17-18, it was Bonzie Colson and Matt Farrell. You keep everybody healthy, and let me see what this basketball program can do. And if you play it under those circumstances, and it's everything about the team, the program, the season, everything. If everything's normal and you're still 6-10, then I'm sorry, Mike, but you know what? Thanks for 20-plus great years, but it's time to make a change.
So if that happens, and we're talking bizarro world, this is not where we're at right now. Who's your short list for head coaches? Do you have one in your desk drawer?
No, I don't. And I'm okay. I think it's fun to talk about short lists, but I think it does a disservice to Mike Brey. It really does.
I agree.
Like, I will unveil my short list the day I find out that there's a list or an opening to put that list to. But I'll tell you, it's a hard to look at this job and this program and say, Mike Brey's got to go, and let's bring in John Beilein or let's bring in Thad Matta. That's too easy.
Yeah, right.
It's too easy a fix. That's like Notre Dame football saying, let's bring in John Gruden and let's bring in Urban Meyer and let's bring in Bob Stoops. How did that work out? All the times that football program had an opening, none of those guys ever took that job.
Right.
Well, you bring in John Beilein 5 years from now, maybe 5 years from now, you're going through the same thing that you're going through with Mike Brey, thinking, when is it going to happen, or who's going to be the replacement? Like, no names, but give me a young, hungry assistant that can recruit guys to Notre Dame, regardless of the academic restrictions, regardless of the perception of, well, it's not a top-tier job in the ACC. Give me a young, hungry assistant that's going to go out there and build a program. Like John Beilein is an unbelievable coach, and I would love to cover a John Beilein team. But like I said, in 5 years, you're probably going through the same thing. Give me a long haul guy that's going to make his mark on this program and put his stamp on this program like Mike Brey did. Like, I get into this discussion all the time with emailers saying, Mike Brey's this and Mike Brey's got to go and Mike Brey did nothing for the program. Go back and look at where this program was in 2000 and say, okay, you're going to go to 3 Sweet 16s. You're going to go to 2 Elite 8s. You're going to win in your second season. You're going to win an ACC tournament championship by beating North Carolina and Duke on back-to-back nights on Tobacco Road. You're going to go to the NCAA tournament. Yeah, you're going to lose some games. You're going to have some down seasons. But how many people, after given all that this guy's accomplished, how many people in 2000 would raise their hand and say, "Yep, sign me up for that"?
A lot of people. Yeah,
they would. And if they say, for the people that say Mike Brey hasn't done anything for this program, or he's a bum, or he hasn't like, come on, like you have a different expectation of what this program is, because on the inside, I'm telling you, on the inside of college basketball, people look at what Mike Brey has done in his time at Notre Dame, and they've been like, that's nothing short of miraculous, because of everything they have to go through, because of jumping league to league. Like, you go from the Big East, you were 27-7 in one of your final years in the Big East, and then you got to start over. And then you go and you win the ACC tournament championship. So it's a hard job, and it's a lot harder than what people might think.
No, that's a really good point, and you make a lot of really good points there, and I appreciate that. You talk some guys off the ledge. I appreciate that.
No, they'll still be on the ledge. It's the same thing as it was against, before they beat Duke. It was fire Mike Brey, get rid of everybody in this program, start over, do this, do that. Then they go and they hang 93 on Duke and Cameron, and it was, we're going back to the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, right.
Here we come. This is our, like, so fans are going to be fans, and they're going to be all over the map. But it's something, it's just to where you have to really just look at it and say, look at it with a critical eye and not a fan eye, and say, yeah, it's been a hard couple of years, but it's also been a pretty good couple of decades for Mike Brey.
No question. No, I mean the body of work speaks for itself, and you're absolutely right. You can't look at this team in the nutshell of this year. I mean, as far as what Mike Brey's tenure has been, you're absolutely right. He's brought this team to a place where I think a lot of people would be like you said, raising your hand and say, yes, I will take that. Struggles and all throughout. I will take the results that Mike Brey has brought. No question about it.
And this is like the third or fourth version that we've gone through with fans as to it's time for a change. It's time to move on.
Sure.
But you know what? I think we're a lot closer to change after a year like this or after a run like this than we were in the past. Just given the fact that, like, we're sitting here on Wednesday morning. On Tuesday afternoon, I sit down in front of my TV and I'm watching Baylor, West Virginia, and I'm watching Illinois, Michigan, and then I flip over to Duke and Georgia Tech and Indiana, Michigan State, and it kind of drives you a little nuts watching the high level of those basketball games. When you're covering a program, it's just kind of there, and like something needs to be done to get a little bit more juice back into this program because it's just kind of treading water. And I'm not looking at Notre Dame to win a national championship, but it's a better job than to just be kind of there and treading water in the ACC.
They need a spark, and that spark could come from Mike Brey. It could come from somebody else, but you're right. The program needs a spark, and we'll see what happens. That's going to be the fun part.
Yep.
Tom, thanks again for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time. If there's any kind of change, you're going to reveal that short list right here on the Irish Breakdown.
I'll save it. I won't even put it in print. I'll be like, see, for Shortlist, see Irish Breakdown.
That's right. See, that's why I love you. All right, man. Hey, thanks for a lot. Thanks. I appreciate it. We got a game tonight, so here's hoping that they can show a little bit of a spark on the floor tonight. We'll see what happens.
Better late than never.
Hey, that's all I'm saying.
Yep.
So for Tom Noie, check out his stuff over at ND Insider and also in the South Bend Tribune. I got to go get mine out of the box right now so I can start reading. Very, very important. But make sure you check out irishbreakdown.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit the notification button. And then wherever you get your podcast, make sure you subscribe because we will be bringing you all kinds of great stuff. And especially our Irish crossover series, which is a lot of fun. So thanks to guys like Tom. So Tom, have a wonderful day. And we will talk to you next time on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.